Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into another episode of the Misfit podcast. We are down a goon today. Sherb's son Zion is teaching him how to fish this week. Hopefully
you teach a Sherb to fish.
Yeah, but you can't make him drink the
throw it
fish
back
water.
in the water with the fish water.
Yep.
Happy vacation, Sherb.
Happy vacation, Sherb. Also, happy Phase 1 day. The 2024 off season officially begins today at misfitathletics.com. So that means you're not too late to go get signed up for your 2-week free trial at misfitathletics.com. And then we are 1 week out from affiliate games. Team Misfit affiliate games. And whether you're a customer or not, there's going to be a free download for that. So, teammisfit.com. Where am I sending people?
Head to the socials, link in the socials.
Yep. Head to Team Misfit Gyms on Instagram. Is that correct?
Yep.
Team Misfit Gyms. And there'll be a link in bio kind of situation where you can download the PDF. Fun little preview of how we do things, how we think about things. Obviously, the end goal is to get you guys on board to sign up. I say that it's easier for me to sell this because I'm not as involved with it, and I get to really observe the gym next door from almost like a third party kind of vibe. It's a really excellent program, and just the care that's taken in terms of putting notes on how to execute the day and what we're looking for stimulus, I think could be a really big asset to your gym and your coaching staff. Gentlemen, I made one of the best breakfast burritos that I've ever had.
Breakfast cheeseburgers.
And it was on listen, you know what? That, Seamus, that was not.
Never going to let you go with that.
That was not a breakfast sandwich.
And you're eating it at breakfast.
No. You see how thick that patty was? And it was on the bottom. Obviously, breakfast meat goes above the egg. Everyone knows that.
Breakfast meat above the egg. Is the egg over easy? Is there yolk in there?
Oh, yeah. I'm fucking around with.
Yeah, see, I place the egg strategically such that the yolk doesn't squirt into my eyeball as soon as I bite into it. Because I get a bagel and the yolk is right under the hole
So
of the bagel.
The sausage patty, which somehow is a breakfast sandwich.
Sausage patty. That's pretty standard. You said a ground beef patty. That's a cheeseburger.
But it's a smash burger patty made to size.
That makes it even more of a cheeseburger. The fact that it's a specific.
Well, no, I mean a traditional cheeseburger is like a steakhouse burger. That's what most people still make. They make that fat ass patty, and I'm aware that if I made one of those, that or a double, and then put an egg on it, not a breakfast sandwich.
It's a cheeseburger with an egg. Yeah, but I still feel like
if I swap a sausage patty out for a beef patty, is that now a burger and not a breakfast sandwich?
If you swapped a burger patty out for a sausage patty, would that be still a cheeseburger?
Like if it was a big fat.
So if you were eating dinner, if you were gonna have dinner,
I could totally make a ground pork burger. Definitely.
You could.
That's not a sausage.
I don't know why you would.
I don't know that that's that's not a sausage. Sausage
Put
isn't
some spices.
Just ground pork, is it?
It's ground pork and spices.
If you have a breakfast sandwich for
this guy doesn't even know what sausage is.
If you have a breakfast sandwich for dinner, is it still a breakfast sandwich, or is that now a dinner sandwich?
No, it's a breakfast sandwich.
All right, so this breakfast burrito that I made, it's rare in the gluten-free world to have a breakfast burrito because something large enough, a true blanket-sized tortilla is not easy.
Thing falls apart, turns into cornmeal.
So what I do is I take 4 gluten-free tortillas, and I put the pan on maybe like a 4, and I put them all in there, sort of, crocheted together. And after about 5 minutes, they adhere together. They steam a little bit, and then they get a little bit of color on them.
Yeah.
Then I take that out, like how you do with potatoes or a Spanish omelet. I put the plate on it, flip the pan over, and then I put some oil down, and I put it up to maybe like a 6 or a 7. And then I build the breakfast burrito on the other side, the side that was already stuck together. And by the time I build it and fold it and start to rotate it, I can get a good. So this thing's hefty. I will say, how like a Tootsie Roll has the twisties on the end. That kind of there's a little excess on the end, but then you just rip that off and it becomes what you use to scoop.
Tortilla,
little bit on the end, not too bad. But I just had leftover taco beef and like only a couple of eggs and some leftover cilantro lime rice. Like, so I was just like, I have to make this.
Yeah.
And
scraping the fridge out for all the
exactly
the shit that you can get rid of.
And it's just one of those lovely accidents. It was, oh man, it was so good. It was great.
That sounds good.
I sat there with a jar of salsa and a spoon and did the like lay it over the top, like each, like the row. So you get 3 just perfect bites.
Yeah.
Man.
It
was great.
Straight lobster meat last week, and it was fucking delicious.
Yeah.
We were talking about this.
Yep.
I was having a conversation about it over
What do you
dinner.
mean by straight lobster meat?
Straight like
You didn't know
just the
brown
meat?
butter, no nothing.
Well, I mean, okay, I just
Salted.
mean it was pure lobster meat. It
Yep.
wasn't like we didn't get lobsters and then
Right.
open them up. It was just you buy the lobster meat and then just like
you
warmed
backed
it
up the
in a
Brinks
butter,
truck, gave them
warmed
all
it-
your gold
Overpaid
bars.
for lobster meat
Yes,
is what you're
correct,
saying.
exactly. Yes, paid.
This is America.
Paid
Okay, you pay for
13x
convenience.
for the lobster meat. Yeah, it was not cheap, but it was so fucking good.
Where did you get it from?
Harbor or the one of the two or
On commercial.
Like down on the waterfront?
yeah,
Yeah.
Harbor Fish or what's the other one for?
So it wasn't 13x, it was 30x.
30x.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No,
That
it
place
was
is
it was not cheap, but it was good, and it was just the pure lobster meat, and just like warm it in a buttery pan, and then dip it also in butter. But
Was this on a breakfast sandwich?
no, it was dinner.
Okay.
Yeah, lobster, nice breakfast sandwich. What lobster meat on a breakfast sandwich be?
I mean, I've had like lobster Benedict before.
Yeah, I was gonna
That's
say
pretty
that was
good.
like
Okay,
lobster
yeah,
Benedict
fair
enough.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Crab
Yeah.
Benedict, things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, that's my snack chat, but it was
Whenever I get that sort of thing for a dish that has lobster in it, I end up liking the leftovers with the butter more than I do the like lobster mac and cheese or lobster hash or whatever. It's just, and I'm kind of like that. Like I don't love like a lot of things mixed together.
Yeah.
But man, just the lobster meat, I'm always just like, this is better than the meal that I just took 12 hours to make.
I don't know if I've ever been satisfied with a lobster meal. I'm always left hungry. I could
Yeah.
eat 2, 3, 4 lobsters worth of lobster meat, and it
Yeah.
still would not be filling.
The only saving grace is if like a lot of times if you're having lobster, you're like at a picnic table with like a bunch of other people and it stretches out over a long enough period of time that maybe with the
Yeah.
sides and with the whatever, but if you just sat down and ate lobster, you'd be like, I didn't eat anything.
yeah.
I could
Yeah.
eat like my mortgage's worth of lobster for dinner and be maybe satisfied.
I actually did get in trouble with my mother-in-law though, because I ate like 2 1/4 and there was 1 left over and I was like, no, I'm good. She's like, what? And I was like, no, I mean, I don't know. It's a couple drinks, a couple of these, a couple of those. Like, I'm good.
I mean,
I
you-
just got this look.
You could play the like, if you want to open it up for me, like you want to take that meat out, I'll finish it. But
The second one was laborious.
Yeah.
And I was flinging knuckles across the table at people and it got a little weird.
Fuck.
You got anything, Ted?
I'm not like a morning snack guy, so I don't really have any breakfast, but I made, I don't know, Jen says it's the best pizza that I've ever made.
Whoa.
Like 2 nights ago or last night. I don't remember. Time is such
Flat
a messy,
circle.
Yeah, it's a flat circle. But it was a no sauce, olive oil, pear, prosciutto, fig spread, mozzarella. You cook that nice and hard, and then after it comes out, you top it with arugula. And you let the arugula kind of sit on it as the pizza cools,
Yeah.
so it like gets a little
That
bit
sounds
soft.
really good.
You would hate it
Yeah, I was gonna
because
say.
I can
because
understand it. I'm trying to think like, okay, salty, sweet,
Yeah, that's what it is.
fatty.
Sweet,
Yeah.
pear.
savory.
You get that kind of like.
I
I'll-
love
I'll-
that. I really like
Listen,
that
I'll
kind of
blend that pizza up and drink it.
Also, black pepper on it too. So
Yep.
like you get a little bit of heat from the black pepper. You get a little bit of bite from the olive oil because I use like a really nice olive oil,
Yeah.
like a tasting olive oil, and then the sweetness from the pears and the fig, and the saltiness from the prosciutto.
Yeah.
And it was.
What'd you say? What kind of cheese did you say?
Just mozzarella. I just
Mozzarella?
used a full
Yeah.
fat mozzarella. Not a lot, just like a tiny little sprinkle. But yeah.
What style of pizza?
Like New York style,
Yeah.
thin crust, really crunchy edges, kind of floppy a little bit
I
in
don't
the
think
middle.
you can do another I don't know how you could do a
that would be
thicker
tough on
crust
a
with
thicker
that
one.
sort of.
With toppings like that aren't like super saucy.
Yep.
It kind of tends to the crust would overtake it if it was thicker. But
that sounds really good.
yeah, it was pretty dope. I'll make you one sometime. I'll bring it in.
What is that? Something you saw somewhere? Like, what was the?
So first of all, my sister was supposed to be coming over for dinner, and she's like sort of vegetarian, sometimes kind of vegan.
Okay.
She's a hippie. So she's like, you should take a break from meat. I'm like, you're an idiot. So she was supposed to be coming over. So I was trying to think, like, what could I make her that she could eat, but I would also enjoy eating and not have to struggle through. But I've had some pear pizzas before that are always really good. And the fig jam I've had on some pizzas separately, and I thought the two of those together plus the saltiness of the prosciutto would be pretty good.
If you just kind of take the general profile of like, I think the mozzarella cheese is great. You get a little sweet, a little salty. Like the fruit is on there as well. You could do like almost like a balsamic glaze. I was going to say a balsamic drizzle would probably have been good. Some goat cheese instead of mozzarella would probably be good too. Goat cheese would be bomb.
I did buy goat cheese, but Jen hates goat cheese, so it didn't end up on the pie.
Cheese.
That's my snack chat.
Damn. Yeah, that's good stuff.
Thank you. Win snack chat today.
Yeah.
All right, Misfits, just a quick break to shout out our show sponsors. The absolute best way to support this podcast and our YouTube channel and everything that we do is to head to these websites and sign up for the stuff, use the codes, all that good stuff. We are, of course, brought to you by ourselves. MisfitAthletics.com. Phase 1 starts today. Everything that we're talking about in this podcast is available on the website, and you've made a really good decision to start here and to listen to the FAQs and how to execute on this stuff. So the only thing left to do is to head to misfitathletics.com for your 2-week free trial to join everyone on phase 1.
If you are an affiliate athlete or owner, you are in the middle of phase 1 for Team Misfit affiliate programming. We are in the middle of a whole bunch of squat clean work, handstand push-ups, chest to bar pull-ups, basically things that we're focusing on this specific phase, but we're about to take a break and go into affiliate games week where we program a handful of individual and team CrossFit game workouts and kind of affiliatize them so that athletes can get a little taste of some of the games workouts. And there's even a couple in there that are just straight up the exact same thing that the games athletes did out there, so athletes can really get an idea of how they stack up, but maybe more so just how incredible those CrossFit Games athletes are. And you can download the Affiliate Games Week for free by heading to the Team Misfit Gyms Instagram. That's at Team Misfit Gyms. Head to the link in the bio. You'll get a free PDF with a whole explanation of how to execute it. And then every single workout has an RX version, an intermediate version, a beginner version, and then subsequent scaling movement kind of suggestions, just to make sure that all of that is as personalized for your athletes as possible, so that at the end of the day, they have an awesome 60-minute affiliate class workout at your gym. Again, you can head to at Team Misfit Gyms on Instagram to get to that download, or if you're interested in, the whole program, teammisfit.com to get signed up.
So for about a decade, I had CrossFit Games athletes that I was coaching come to me about what supplements that they should take, what website they should head to. And unfortunately, as someone who nerds out on this stuff, it was like, this company has the right ingredients, but a bullshit amount, quote unquote, proprietary blend. And asking them to be a full-blown like alchemist and mix this with that and this and have it taste like shit is something that, decision fatigue will set in and they don't want to listen. So when a couple of people came to me and said, will you help me start a supplement company? It was like, boy, will I. Like the amount of the ingredients that I know actually has science behind it, and being able to go in and tell athletes, you can head to properfuel.co and we have a post-workout nutrition that has everything that you need in it. We have a hydration supplement. We have pre-workout, whether it's stim or non-stim. All of the stuff that's in this is backed by scientific data. And most importantly, the amounts that are needed to actually move the needle for intensity, for hydration, for recovery are in these products. And you can head to properfuel.co and use the code word Misfit to save. All right, back to the show. All right, so today's episode, while I don't know exactly what's going to happen during it, there's this mix of like, we're going to give you a sample training day. If you don't follow misfitathletics.com, you just listen to the podcast. You can hear a little bit about sort of what a day on the blog would look like. Also, that this conversation that we've had multiple times in the past of like, what is the ideal training day for athletes? And then there's just so much stuff sort of in between that lives as frequently asked questions on what order should I be doing this? Should I be splitting this up into 2 sessions? So we're basically going to look at it through the eyes of how we give instructions on our website. So that starts with the open athlete and makes its way all the way up to semifinals and CrossFit Games athletes. So there are options for basically everybody when you come to our website, and that does include equipment and scaling modifications on all of the Hatchet workouts. So, you know, I felt like it was timely because it's that time of year where we have to almost remember how to get into the swing of things and what's the best way to tackle things. And I've been having a lot of remote coaching conversations about what should my volume look like. And I think at this time in the year, setting yourself up with better habits with a little bit lower volume is the kind of thing where you could slowly follow this linear progression model of like, I'm going to add this little piece in here, or I'm going to tweak my warm up this way, so that when you get into the like real nastiness of making sure you're ready during phase 3 and then competition season, that you're not having to convince yourself to add in all of these behaviors and habits while adding volume, because those things simultaneously are that's a lot.
Especially if you've been taking like time off, like we suggest, whether even if you've been kind of following a little bit more structure because your season ended in, you know, quarterfinals or semifinals, like even just getting back into a much more structured program, not that the previous phases aren't structured, but we're back to kind of the off-season style of programming, kind of reestablishing your habits. And then as far as like the training volume thing goes, it's if you're currently doing kind of like minimum necessary volume to maintain your fitness, switching on, you know, from one, just because it ticks over from Sunday to Monday doesn't necessarily mean it's wise to all of a sudden jack up volume by 50%,
right,
you know, across a single day, just because, you know, the phase 1 has begun. So setting yourself up for success over the course of phase 1, and with kind of, you know, adding 1 piece in per week, or 1 to 2 pieces where it makes sense, is going to be, that's much more digestible for both your physical aptitude as well as just stress across, you know, because for every training piece you add, we also need the commensurate amount of recovery, hydration, sleep, nutrition, all that sort of stuff. So if you make a huge change across one day, you might be setting yourself up for failure, where you could just be a little bit smarter and more structured about it.
Right. First thing that you're going to see every time you log into our program, regardless of the day, is morning movement. And I want to bring this up first, not just because it's the like first thing that's there, but it's also the first part of your day. And more than anything, it is a nudge to push yourself in a direction where you start to audit the behaviors that help you as an athlete, whether in the gym, out of the gym, and things like making sure that you're starting the day hydrated, making sure that you know, my body reacts really well to like a higher carb, higher protein breakfast, whatever it is. Some people have to train earlier and don't necessarily know or don't feel great when they put a bunch of stuff in their body and then they have to go train. And because, again, we're so far from the competitive season right now, so much of this is about a commitment to these little like N=1 experiments and like guess and check work. Like when you get up in the morning, know that if you move your body around and you get some proper hydrate down the hatch with 16 ounces of water and you head out for a walk in the sunlight or do some mobility, whatever, you're setting yourself up for a much better day. But you have to go in and move those levers around to fit your day, to fit what's about to happen. Are you just heading to work and you're not training until way later? But there's a lot that goes into figuring out what makes the most sense for you in the morning, especially depending on your training day.
I think you can think about it from two perspectives. One, if your thing is training, like if that is your full-time job or you treat it as such, I think the morning movement is kind of that tone setter for the day, regardless of what you do for the actual execution of it, whether you sit on a machine for a certain period of time, or it's a little bit more like get out, go for a walk, get in the sun, that sort of thing. I think it essentially kind of, it's part of the routine. You're setting the tone for the day by, the first thing that you're doing, you are checking off the box of like first training piece done, right? You're setting you're getting easy momentum to move kind of once you get into the gym. If you are more of a, hobby CrossFitter, like, quarterfinals, the open is your thing, and like you're not quite so worried about the performance side and like really setting that established kind of routine. I think there's just a ton of benefit as far as like making sure that you are getting enough sleep the next night, and just making sure that your body is doing what it's supposed to as far as elevating cortisol in the morning, so that you do have kind of that down regulation throughout the day. So that is going to help you with when it comes to like, your full-time gig, if it's like an office related job, that sort of thing, just mental acuity. And also just kind of similar along the lines of the first person I was alluding to, is just getting a little bit of momentum for the day. Like it's the idea of making your bed first thing in the morning. Like you check off a simple box of something that you got done, you did successfully, and it's a pretty low barrier to entry for execution.
You want to feel awake. You want to feel energized. You want to be hydrated. I mean, those are some really good check boxes to have there. And I think we attract a certain kind of person to our website through our content, through our branding. And you could be coming to the website 5-6 days a week and literally be doing lift 1, conditioning 2. That's what you do. But there's something about someone who's going to come to misfitathletics.com and be like, yeah, my best scenario is those 2 pieces a day, but I think they probably take it seriously enough that they're trying to get as much as they can out of that.
Yeah.
And when the volume is on the lower end like that, these little things can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Like my volume personally looks a lot more like the open athlete instructions. And I've talked about this before, but like the oatmeal, honey, collagen breakfast can knock like a couple of seconds off of my split times on machines. So like, it's like, if that's the case and I'm not thinking about these things, if I expand it out for 27 weeks, how much of a change could I make metabolically if every morning I thought about, I am going to take the extra time, I'm going to make sure, that I'm warmed up. And I've got some other stuff in here later on in the podcast, just notes on mobility. But if you are like what people refer to as the weekend warrior or whatever, you have to know the most advantageous time of day to do your mobility flow. And a lot of people are just like, I have to get it done in the morning. I know a lot of athletes that get it done in the morning that have full-time jobs, because the sort of decision-making fatigue and that mental gas tank just get beat down by the end of the day.
Yep.
And it's like, I'm not going to skip my Metcon and lift after work.
Yeah.
But am I gonna stretch at 8:30 p.m. when I can be, hands behind the head, feet kicked up, watching Netflix?
Yeah.
And you would hope the answer would be yes, and hopefully you can build in the discipline to do so. But we all know exactly what it feels like to have one of those days where you're like, I'm fucking stretching.
Yeah.
You have all of the energy in the world in the morning, especially when it comes to decision making, to be like, okay. And for me personally, I have 2 routines that I do, and both of them are head to toe. I've got a 15-minute version A and version B that if I'm only doing 15 minutes, I would just go A, B every day, back and forth.
Yeah.
And then I've got a 30-minute version that, I can typically do on a weekend or a day that I'm working from home, something like that. But I just go in and stretch my ankles and my knees and my hips and my glutes and my back and my upper body, and it makes a really big difference.
Is 15 minutes a necessary time commitment for someone just getting into it?
I think so. I think 15 minutes
or
is...
maybe a better question, what's minimum effective dose?
Yeah.
Because 15 minutes, like, for me, like, I'll put it out there for the listener, like, my morning movement is 90 seconds on an assault bike that gets my heart rate up towards like the 140, 150. Loosen up the hips a little bit, make sure.
But do you do 15 minutes of mobility at all throughout the day? Total stretching. Maybe not.
Maybe not. Probably not throughout the entire day. Like certainly like pre-workout stuff, post-workout.
Part of this too is an old guy thing.
Yeah.
I feel better once I wrap my mind around the idea of connective tissue sort of making us a single muscle.
Yeah.
I started to realize like upstream and downstream can be pretty wild.
Yeah.
Like if I can finally get my thoracic spine to release, then maybe it even affects my glutes, which would then affect my hips, and you know, gets pretty crazy. So that is part of it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it needs to be part of your morning routine. And you could also break it up. You could do like lower half in the morning, midline before your workout, and you know, upper body.
Yeah.
And that would, I think, would be pretty easy to do. Okay, so we're going to start to read through some of these, you know, sort of instructions and pieces. And I want people to start to think about it in terms of appropriate volume for you as an athlete. You don't need to pigeonhole yourself into a category. You can hear that the instructions for a quarterfinals athlete are X and say the open ones still make more sense for my schedule a lot of days in the week. And we'll get into how someone can, quote unquote, earn their volume. So if you are looking at Monday, September 11th at misfitathletics.com on the Hatchet program, the open athlete instructions are perform lift 1, conditioning 2, and if you choose one more piece, choose one more piece if you have the time and energy to do it well. So you're looking at this and you are seeing sets of 5 on back squat, and you're seeing an interval with a lovely amount of burpee box jump overs and rowing going back and forth. So again, volume progression here. This is the lowest amount of volume that we are recommending in a day for someone who is trying to be a competitive CrossFitter. Now, when we think about this, when I'm looking at the actual, spreadsheet, I see back squat warm-up protocol above the back squat, and I see high intensity protocol above the interval. Those are the types of things, to me, that you should make at this point in the year, especially non-negotiable on your end. So when you look at it, you say, well, I could do sets of 5 back squat and a 15 to 20 minute interval piece. Could be in and out of the gym in 40 minutes, something like that. And you should not think that.
Please no.
Yes. Like this is if done correctly, can push into the 90 minute range. So you think about this as an affiliate class, not super easy to get 2 warm-ups and a cool down in a 60-minute class.
Yeah.
Obviously there's some of the herding cats. That's part of that.
Yep.
And you can become more targeted. So, number 1, I'll ask you, how do you choose the order of the pieces?
I would choose. I think I just choose based on weaknesses, a combination of weaknesses, but also knowing So for me, like the back squat would be a higher priority than rowing and burpee box jump overs for my personal fitness.
Yep.
So I would say, okay, so we prioritize back squatting. The only instance in which I wouldn't do it first is if I felt like whatever preceded it, the conditioning, was going to enable the back squatting to actually go better.
Sure.
We see athletes sometimes, and you can say, well, it's because you didn't warm up well enough. If you warmed up well enough, then you should have been fine to squat.
A short to medium cardio piece that's not going to like blast you could be a great warm up.
Yeah, rowing and burpee box jump overs, I'd say probably not. Like that might, I might be able to give the juice there, but legs aren't going to feel great, especially if I'm going to do the squatting in the same session after that. So for me, it's let's prioritize the thing that you need to work on, and considering how you are going to best perform in that. Because again, if I wake up at 5 a.m. to do that, there might not be any degree of warming up aside from jacking my heart rate up with rowing and burpee box jump overs that really gets my nervous system ready to back squat. That's a pretty unique instance, but in general, I'm prioritizing the thing that I need to work on the most. And then I can ask myself, okay, if I don't do that first, would it go just as well or better if I did it second?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to look at it. I mean, you gave the answer that I was looking for, but if you listened to the Phase 1 podcast, which will have dropped a week ago, we talked to you guys about what these biases are. So we've got, for hatchet, we've got the 1 rep max back squat, we've got burpee box jump overs and handstand walking, we've got legless rope climbs, we've got, I believe, ski erg, and what's the long row?
For MFT?
Oh no, C2 bike. So that those biases are there. This information is all available in the phase guides, which you can find on our social and download. But when you look at that, I then would want an athlete to have that list and highlight, like, these are my things. Here's the 2 or 3 things, especially an open athlete, 2 or 3 things that I am going to prioritize. So then you can start to let things take shape and say, I really do suck at burpee box jump overs.
Yeah.
And no matter what, that is going to be the thing that I spend the most time warming up for, thinking about strategy. Even if the lift will suffer a little after, this is the thing.
Yeah.
This is what I'm locked in on. And if you can have those pieces, you can start to understand what your order should be, 2 or 3 days a week. It's already taken care of.
Yep.
And then the nuance you mentioned starts to be what a decision you're making on 1 or 2 days a week, where you're like, okay, I am prioritizing conditioning right now, but I'm actually going to feel a bit more fired up if I lift first. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. But if you're all in on getting better at the ski erg, the C2 bike, any of those things, you really want to make sure that you're thinking about it from the guise of this is my thing.
Yeah. Either you should consider it from both the mental focus perspective and the physical energy allocation perspective. Because if you're well, I think I'm gonna feel better if I do X first, but you also know that the farther into the training session you get, the less kind of mental focus you have. You kind of balance both of those things, because there is, if you're thinking oh, I'm gonna prioritize the rowing and burpee box jump overs, how much is there are you kind of thinking about what pace you should hold? Are you starting to crunch, going as far as the athlete IQ stuff and crunching numbers as to how long these intervals are going to take, and therefore what pace you should be rowing at, that sort of thing? And if you're, if that's the focus, but you're putting that at the end of the day where you're not going to necessarily pay as much attention to it, you can kind of think about it from that perspective too. There's combination of the how much energy you physically have, and then there's also the how much energy do you mentally have to allocate to a piece.
A lot of our lifting warm-ups center around the idea of getting into the positions that you want to be in going into the lift. We've got some activation stuff, and then basically blood flow in getting on machines. One trick for anybody who struggles with, it could be the 5 a.m. person, or on the other side of the day, you're training at 5 p.m. and you just sat at a desk all day. Some form of plyometric explosive movement is personally what I use when I'm how the hell am I going to move this weight? Mm-hmm. There's just something about that, crossing the threshold from I've been sedentary either from sleep or work, and now I'm supposed to be explosive, that I try to find a way to be explosive prior to touching the bar. So squatting, super easy. I'll just do explosive seated jumps.
Yeah.
I'll sit down, rock forward, jump as high as I can. I personally find that adopting an aggressive mind state or attitude, or a little bit of a I'm not going to yell into the microphone, but starting to yip and yap and make some noises. I don't know. There's just something about I need to tell my body that we're about to do that. And it could be as simple as I do strict press or bench press once a week, and I'll do really light dumbbells and just see it. Basically I'm going to hold on, but see if I can throw them as high as I can.
Yeah.
Just being aggressive first makes a huge difference for me.
Yeah. For when we're warming athletes up in the gym for strength sessions like that, that's a perfect example of someone who's going to come in at 5 p.m. after sitting at a desk for
right.
Maybe they had a shitty day and they were at their desk for 8 hours straight. It's got to remember that your musculature will default to your slow twitch or type 1 muscle fibers if you are not, one, moving quickly, or two, generally arousing those type 2 muscle fibers and your nervous system, and those kind of go hand in hand. So the things like the eccentrics, loading the muscle in like the lengthening phase, things like good mornings, RDLs, that sort of thing is great for kind of waking up the nervous system. And then, like you said, explosive movements like jumping, kettlebell swinging, just generally move. Once you start to move the empty barbell, we tell athletes, like, if you're moving an empty bar, all of your warm-up reps need to be like sit down under control, stand up as fast as you can. Like, you have to move fast to tell your body like you are about to, one, either need to move like quickly, like actually, or like you're not going to stand up a heavy back squat if you're deliberately doing it slowly. Like, the force production that required is essentially fast movement. So you need to wake yourself up.
So just thinking about something like a back squat or going into Olympic lifting or deadlifting, there's a significant portion of time that it takes to go from, again, I just slept, or I've, been sitting for work or whatever it is. So really taking the time to do that and, working up a bit of a lather and feeling like set 1 has the same standard as so many people in a 5x5 back squat are like, I feel great. Set 3, 4, or 5. Yeah. And it's like, no, we have to get to a point where an athlete understands that set 1 is a working set. It's not like part of the warm up. So just kind of the insinuation that takes up a decent amount of time. When we look into warming up for a conditioning piece, Hunter and I are sitting here right now, and a significant portion of our blood volume is in our torso, sitting around our organs. And there are kind of 2 scenarios, and you probably, if you think about it long enough, can think about how both feel in exercise. Hunter gets a phone call that his apartment's on fire right now. And
thank fucking Christ.
Well, let's pretend, Hunter's golf clubs are on fire. I don't know. Something that surfboards. There's a surfboard fire.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yes.
Big problem.
Yes. Huge problem. His body is like panic mode. It is going to contract his midline and push as much blood as he can down into his lower legs, or lower half into his legs. And one of the ways that it does that is it jacks your heart rate to the sky, because the more your heart pumps, the more it can push blood, basically. So when we are on a machine and we're feeling fantastic, and then our legs feel rather heavy and our heart rate is through the roof, and we don't understand how that could possibly happen, you didn't warm up.
Yep.
You didn't warm up in the way that your body wants to. The more natural way to warm up is to slowly tell your body that in 12 to 15 minutes, you want it to be in a certain state. And the 2 things that are happening here are, we're probably going to, a great example would be getting on the rower and warming up. You're getting muscle contractions in so many different spots in your body that there is a cue there that area of your body could benefit from some blood flow. And the easiest way to do that is to slowly increase your heart rate. So if we have muscle contraction and we have a slow increase to our heart rate, our body is not going to panic, and it's going to allow you to send blood everywhere. We're going to send blood and oxygen and nutrients to the areas that will help you basically get into a place where you can warm up really well. And one cool thing about why we put this in here and why we're so crazy about even warming up for zone 2 type work is when they look at how the body processes lactate and is able to clear it. Basically, if you got onto a bike and were riding at a zone 2 pace, somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes, your body would be having a horrendous time clearing waste. It just gets to a point. That's why people are like, I can never get up to my heart rate on the bike, because it does take that 12 to 15 minutes. So you get to that point, and then if you had gradually worked yourself up to that spot and then rested a little bit, you then, for the next 60 to 90 minutes, are going to clear waste better than you could before.
Right.
So it's at its worst in that 12 to 15 minute range
to essentially accumulate that
exactly
waste.
And that's where we get athletes running into a wall. That's where we get athletes who feel great 2 laps of a 5K and that third lap are completely falling apart because that peak is in that zone of, and again, we all know what it feels like, a 20-minute AMRAP where you're like really, really falling apart somewhere in that 12 to 15 minute range.
Yeah.
And then those ones where you're just like, man, I just keep adding another round, adding another round, adding another round. And it's just a slow increase of the heart rate there. So we are trying to slowly introduce movement and blood flow into your body. Take a little bit of a rest, and then we can really get after it, and your body can do a really good job of clearing waste. But again, that's 12 to 15 minutes. There's probably movement prep built into that. If it's a high intensity workout, you're going to want to go even further than that. So maybe you do the 12-minute version of the warm up where you go from resting heart rate somewhere up near zone 2, nice and slow. But then you want to, go spin on the assault bike a little bit to rev the engine and go through the movements. So we're looking at 20 to 25 minute range.
Total warm-up time?
Total warm-up time when you're like truly 3, 2, 1 go?
Depends on the ranges of motion that are required. Rowing and burpee box jump over is not different than chest to bar pull-ups and overhead squats, right? So as far as like ranges of motion and muscular activation that's required. But yeah, I think even if you're on the short end of the machine-based warm-up in the 12-minute range, even like 10 if you're trying to condense your time frame, the combination of like taking a piss, doing any activation that you need to, you're in that 20 to 25 minute range for sure.
Most people, when they're tracking their heart rate using a wearable to look at their data from a workout, will start and stop at 3, 2, 1 go, and then when the workout ends. Which is totally fine, but one better way to either add to that or to change the way that you do it is to look at the other sort of sides of what that graph should be. So if I'm looking at, on Garmin, if I turn my phone sideways, I get the like heart rate graph that goes all the way across the screen. I want to add a from resting arc up to that intensity on the warm up. And then I want to do the opposite on the cool down. So obviously I'm way up nice and high with my heart rate by the end of this workout. And I want to be able to take that and gradually arc back down to basically where I started. And the protocol is very simple. Basically you want to stay up into, that sort of zone 2-ish range for about 5 minutes. Luckily for me, I can, without a ton of effort, stay in zone 2 after a pretty nasty piece. Yeah. But some people who are like exceptionally fit actually end up becoming more sore because they have that drop off from that point.
Fit enough for the heart rate to just fall back through the floor.
Exactly. So you want to go find a machine is the easiest thing to do and stay up in zone 2 for 5 minutes, stay in zone 1 for about 5 minutes after that. And then the final 5 minutes, just make sure you keep moving. You can go for a walk. That's what we do at the affiliate. A lot of people go for a walk during that period of time. If I'm letting myself do that, I have to give myself little things to do. Like I got to go fill my water, and then I got to walk across the street to get my protein shake. And I'm always looking at my watch to be like, did I continue to move for 15 minutes? And it's the same concept as the warm up in terms of we need the heart to continue to pump to move the waste.
Yeah.
And then getting rid of the waste in our lymph system is just, again, muscle contractions.
Yep.
So if you're doing, if you're going for a run, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be your legs, right?
Yep.
So just doing some version of walking and jogging to get through these zones afterwards.
Yeah. Like
when I was doing marathon prep last summer, like that was night and day difference. If I took the actual 15 minutes to do that, I didn't feel like I ran at all by, 24 hours later. And if I like had to rush to work, my legs hurt for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that we do to kind of convince affiliate athletes, and we've developed a good enough culture where a lot of folks will come in at least 5 minutes before class, even if it's 5 minutes of just pedaling on a C2 bike is better than, changing your shoes and running up to the whiteboard to get up for the warm up. And they'll do the same thing after class. But you can think about it like, sometimes thinking about it as like you need to warm up and you need to cool down, you're like, I don't need to do that. But if I say, hey, you can accumulate 100 hours of additional cardio with essentially no additional effort, which we know has benefits to your fitness, longevity, and overall health, all of a sudden that gets, the warm up and cool down gets reframed as, I can do very little as far as from an exertion standpoint and accumulate a lot of time, repetitions on machines with my heart rate elevated. And that adds up after a while, especially for like the affiliate level athlete. But even if you're an open athlete who's just trying to make the most of their few pieces, like you can get a lot of additional cardio, 10 minutes on the front end, 10 minutes on the back end, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 100 minutes, 100 additional minutes, essentially an hour and a half of additional cardio a week.
It's really
that's pretty useful.
It's really hard to move the needle on the side that we want to move the needle on. Typically when we're trying to, like, if an athlete's trying to lose weight, your calories in, calories out thing, like, do this, but don't do this. If you don't want to be sad, go walk until your watch tells you you've burned 200 calories and then find something that's 200 calories and like swallow it in one bite and then just be like, damn, like this is not an easy equation to manipulate without lowering calorie intake. But if you think about it from that perspective of if I'm adding, if you really committed to showing up early to class or whatever, 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you just extrapolate that math to an entire year and you're all of a sudden you're literally like dozens of hours of additional cardio.
Yep. So again, painting the picture of at the lowest amount of volume that we recommend, we're still looking at probably 75 to 90 minutes a day if done properly.
Yeah, I think depends on the pieces, like depends on how they complement each other. If it's a back squat and then it's a short Metcon that has squatting and burpees, like, maybe not a ton of additional like intermediate warm up could be shorter, but yeah, I would say probably on the at least an hour, probably closer to like that 75 to 90 minutes to really do it correctly based on how we kind of like envision it getting done.
So the final instruction for the open athlete is to choose another piece if you have time and energy to do it well. I still don't want to have that conversation until we talk about mobility routine and accessory routine. There are 3 accessories listed per day. The instructions for an open athlete is to complete 0 to 2 of those. And you're going to know pretty easily which ones are going to help you. At the very least, I would ask people to start with the mobility stability stuff. That's the final thing listed. It's going to rotate through upper body, lower body, midline throughout the week. If you just did that and stretched every day, you have a really good chance of not like ramping up intensity for the open and messing your shoulder up doing chest to bar pull-ups or something like that.
Yeah.
So we're still not there in terms of adding that third piece,
including skill. You would say you would prioritize that accessory column ahead of skill for the open level athlete.
I think there's just so much nuance to that, right?
Yeah.
Like if it's like, for instance, on this day, we've got some handstand walking built into that. You got to look at
can't put your hands over your head.
Yeah, exactly. There's either you've got great mobility and no stability and you just can't handstand walk and you got to practice, or I can't put my hands over my head. That's why we moved to giving every program the full week in advance. I would want you to be looking at this from the standpoint of which days can I handle more volume? Which days, again, do I really need to lean into? Handstand walking is one of those skills that we're biasing. Like, how helpful is that for me? So yeah, I would say that is probably a good like nuance and probably a day-to-day question that you have to ask yourself. But it's a good segue into how you're choosing whether to add another piece. And it doesn't need to be black and white. It doesn't need to be, I'm a 3-piece a day person. It's what day of the week, again, do I have the time and energy to do a good job with this? And if it's 0, that's fine. Like the program is designed for you to get like really awesome benefit and be able to crush the open if you just do those 2 pieces. But going in and adding a lot of times can just be like, my schedule fits a little bit better if I shift everything and I train Saturday, Sunday. So my week's super challenging to deal, to deal with everything that I got going on.
Yep.
So if I can do a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday training during the week, and I'm going to do 2 pieces a day, and then Saturday, Sunday, I'm going to add that third one and maybe just stretch it out a little bit more, making sure you're getting your mobility, adding in a little accessory work, adding in, another piece there. Don't pigeonhole yourself into, I have to do this and this. And again, week in advance can be helpful. You can take Monday's handstand walking and, put it off to the side for Saturday.
Yeah, not all of the training days, like we do our best to organize them in such a way that's like, you're not doing just Monday isn't like, wow, I did that whole training day in 2 hours, and Tuesday it's like the mandatory work took me 3 hours on its own.
Yep.
There's, we do our best to make sure there's variance within the day, but there are a lot of instances where it's like, yeah, I thought that I was going, or maybe by the time you get to that piece, you were like, well, I thought I was going to have the time, or I thought I was going to have the energy, but I don't. There's nothing wrong with moving a piece to another day,
right.
Especially being able to see the week in advance, just so that you're not putting, the handstand walk skill on a day with a shitload of handstand push-ups, for example. But there's nothing wrong with moving something like that, especially, a more skill-based element or something like that. Moving that to a different day isn't a problem.
So as we move on to quarterfinals athletes, very similar schedule here. But they're going to do the back squat, they're going to do the interval, and then they're going to do the skill. Mm-hmm. And that really gets us, for the quarterfinals athlete, on most days with 3 pieces, a well-rounded, you're going to lift, you're going to do conditioning, and you're going to have a dedicated skill piece that's there. And that works more into what you were saying of finding the balance on that given day.
Yep.
We have to make sure, as we work our way down the line, that no matter what combination of things an athlete's doing on a given day, it makes sense for that day. And then, don't ruin the next day,
right?
That sort of thing to progress through. The 0 to 2 additional pieces, again, would follow that same structure of, do you have the time and energy to do it well? These habits that we want you to try and build earlier on in the off season this year, it's just not going to be helpful for you to say, okay, they're giving me permission to do 5 pieces if I'm a quarterfinals athlete. We've said it, tongue in cheek for years, but no one's impressed with free time. Congratulations, you have free time. Use it wisely. Do your warm-ups, do your mobility, do your accessory. So many athletes in the open and quarterfinals category can injure themselves pretty quickly with doing this sort of thing, both because the volume's not necessarily manageable, but also, how do you prevent injury, low or high volume? You do your warm-ups, you do your cooldowns, you do your accessory, your mobility.
Yeah, I mean, when you're thinking about the decision to add more volume, you have to remember, until you get to, like, even quarterfinals, I guess more so now because of how the schedule is, where you might do like 2 tests in one day.
Yep.
But essentially, like, to go front, the open is the one. You need to be able to go very hard 1 time per week for 3 weeks, assuming it's like a single part. Maybe there's a part 2. When you get to quarterfinals, again, the total volume of the quarterfinals weekend is going to be net less than the total volume of a typical training day for the most part. So you have to really ask yourself, like, you have to really understand, you are asked in quarterfinals and in the open to have the capacity to go very, very hard 1 time, not accumulate a lot of volume over the course of the day. So for athletes, asking, do I need to do this piece? You have to ask yourself, like, do I have the time and energy to do it at the intensity that will move the needle for performance in quarterfinals? Or is it more like, well, I just need to work on this skill. I just need to get better at handstand walking. And there's an element of that too, where it's more of a neurological adaptation that has to occur, and it's not necessarily going to contribute a ton to, like, actual adrenal fatigue, more just kind of, I need the mental focus to be able to work on my handstand walking. And so it comes down to, again, the free time, like, terrific, but if you're filling that free time with suboptimal training with moderate intensity training versus constantly varied high intensity functional movement,
Yep.
you're not going to move the needle as much as paying attention to the warm up, paying attention to the recovery. And the recovery aspect is probably is kind of the bastard stepchild of the equation. Remember that every time you add training, you are digging the hole that is your fatigue and the necessity to recover a little bit deeper. And if you are not able to allocate the commensurate resources to recovery on the back end, if you do an additional 20-minute Metcon.
Input, output.
If you do an
cheat
additional
that.
20-minute Metcon, but you are going to sleep the same amount that you did the night before, it's like that will eventually add up. It won't add up necessarily tomorrow or the next day, but maybe in December, maybe in January when you're like, oh God, I've been
You
fucking
add that
at
stress
this
ball too
forever.
of competitive season, and then people start tweaking their
Yeah,
back,
and you
their
like
shoulder,
wonder
their knee.
why, and it's like it's so hard to put a finger on. It's like, well, it wasn't necessarily the deadlift session you did last week. It's because you've been slowly beating yourself into the ground for the last 3 months, and the chickens have come home to roost.
Yeah. I don't want to skip ahead yet because there is a quarterfinals athlete that's up and coming, on the rise, wants to make it to semifinals, still belongs in the Hatchet program, but needs to start building these habits of what a semifinals and games athlete would do.
Mm-hmm.
So the exercise that I want to do is, and you're a fit enough person. I know you don't have any interest in this, but you could, as an exercise, say to yourself, okay, I'm looking at this Hatchet day.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to do 2 sessions.
Okay.
You're going to do 4 total pieces.
Yep.
Which 4 pieces are you doing? How are you breaking them up? What order? That sort of thing.
Okay, so back squat and lunging for sure.
So there's 2 lifts in there. Lift 1, lift 2.
2 lifts because strength is comparatively to a semifinals athlete not there. I think the row burpee box jump interval. Are we also assuming that, am I doing mandatory? So
Yep.
back squat and interval is mandatory.
And skill.
I'm doing handstand walking, and then so pick one additional piece.
Yep.
So that would be the lunging.
Yep.
It's actually a little bit. So I'll give.
And
I'll
it does say 0 to 2 additional pieces. So depending on how much time you have and what that skill is, like handstand walking.
For me at this time of year, if we were saying like, basically I would add an accessory.
Yep.
I would do maybe shoot for the middle to upper end of the accessory. Again, this time of year being a time where I can allocate a little bit more resources to building strength, knowing that like now's the time to move that needle. I would probably, so I've got back squatting, lunging, and accessory. Those are kind of like strength type things. And then interval of burpee box jump overs and rowing and skill fall more in line to the CrossFit-y things. I think I would back squat, prioritize back squatting, and then accessory in one session.
Yep.
Potentially back squat, handstand walk, and accessory in one session. And then I would probably do the rowing and burpee box jump overs. I would start with that in my second session and then end with the lunging. And that is because from what we know, doing that strength work after conditioning, you typically see better gains in like overall strength if you do strength after. If you are going to do conditioning and strength in the same session, do the strength
Especially if you're
afterward.
trying to put on mass.
Especially if you're trying to put on mass and strength. Or is it just mass strength too? Does it matter?
So it's mostly hypertrophy. So you can still get the neurological benefit. And I mean, the funny thing is there aren't really that many people in CrossFit. Like you could strategize literally lifting and then doing conditioning to be like, I want to be small.
Yeah.
I mean, there aren't that many people that are so big in the sport that do really well,
right,
where that would be a thing. But I mean, some people are attracted to the sport that are, I mean, when I think of 2011 regionals, like everyone there was like 10 pounds too jacked in board shorts. Like we regressed back to like fitness and then, came somewhere in the middle now. But, and I think the one thing to mention there is the lunging is 6x10.
Yeah.
So if that was another lift and it was like super heavy, snatches or something like that,
I would probably not do that before conditioning.
Exactly. Yep. So starting to, even if you look at, if you're this athlete that we're talking about, that is a shoe-in for quarterfinals, but like maybe a little bit of a long shot for semifinals, start building that habit now of those 2-a-days and the mobility and the accessory and all this stuff that we're talking about. Even if you look at it and say, I think I could probably do this in one of those long meandering sessions, you want the habits of how do I fuel on a day like that? If you're going to do that and split it up morning and afternoon, like there's a pretty significant amount of calories that sort of have to go in before your first session and after your first session. So just things that you're going to have to get used to be able to move the needle. Because again, if we jam all those things together, you start to wonder, like, did I cool down? Did I warm up? Is that the warm up, the workout that I did? I'm just going to go into this next one.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important for athletes that have a longer term, bigger goal within the sport to start to build these habits.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that you don't necessarily need to do every day, but kind of just getting into the, dress for the job you want, not the one that you have sort of thing is a valuable way to think about it. But I would just caution folks that should not be just because you are that athlete who might be like pretty solid quarterfinals, but maybe long shot semifinals. Like, we're not saying like get in the habit at the expense of intensity. We're saying like if you are
the opposite,
someone who's
basically.
if you are somebody who is actually like really wanting to dedicate like a lot more time and energy to this, like the first thing has to be, putting out on the pieces that you are working hard in, and then the occasional like, what is it like to do, go home, fuel, come back to the gym, re-warm back up, that sort of thing.
Last set of instructions here. And this is for teens and masters. Semifinals CrossFit Games athletes in the teens and masters category. If you are a teen or a masters athlete that falls into the open or quarterfinals, you just follow those same instructions that are there. And again, scaling and equipment modifications are in every single workout on Hatchet. Once again, we're just adding basically one more mandatory thing. That's going to be the MF2 session. So you'll do your back squats, your interval work, your handstand walking stuff, and now the additional mandatory piece is zone 2 work. If you are going to attempt to perform at that level, this is now like no longer either I need it or I don't. You have to do it.
Yeah.
There are too many benefits that live even outside of just what happens to your aerobic functioning in terms of like, what is my heart rate at this pace? There's also, especially if you've done I think the easiest one to notice is doing a full phase of C2 bike twice a week. And then being at a spot in a workout where you feel fantastic, where you used to feel like absolute dog shit. And you're just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like every time you pick up those dumbbells and lunge down 25 feet and 25 feet back, it's like nothing.
Yeah.
Where it used to be like, I'm going to put these down when I turn around. How long is it going to take? Like you have to gather your feet and take that additional, step and like really work your mind into it. There's too much benefit if you are going to compete at that level in the teens and masters category not to do it. Now that's not to say like we have the zone 2 work on Mondays and then on an active rest day as an option for everyone. Mm-hmm. If you if you don't have good aerobic functioning, like that's going to be up really high on your list.
That has to be, for sure. And I think, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I'll ask the question, let's say that Monday, like I know that I need to get my aerobic work in, and it would probably benefit me to have those 2 sessions per week, or it would definitely benefit me, but having a 60-minute piece on Monday along with all this other shit is just not not tenable for me.
Yeah.
Would it be okay? Would you say like, okay, athlete, you're going to do a 90-minute MF2 session on your rest day instead of a 45-minute one? Is that something you'd say is like acceptable, not ideal, no, not too much difference? Because we know that like a lot of that is just time spent
Sure.
in zone 2.
Yep.
Like a cumulative, whether it's 2 sessions or 1, like.
I think it would have to be the right athlete. I think if Mike Kern or Justin LaSalle said, I got 1 session,
Yeah,
and they know what wattage they're going to choose and they have the data and they've done a bunch in the past.
Yeah.
What we see with athletes who don't have that good aerobic functioning is the pace fluctuates too much. They sort of bonk
right.
in a little bit of a higher zone. So in that regard, I would say that 145-minute session can then go 45 minutes and 50 minutes, 55 minutes. And we do have that in the instructions.
Yeah.
So you could work yourself up to that spot. But if you're only going to do 1 a week and you want to add volume that way, I would follow linear progression. Just every week where you see a pretty steady pace throughout the whole thing, you can add 5 minutes the following week. And you can get yourself to that point. But like if I went and did a 90-minute session right now, let's say I was trying to hold 130 watts, it would probably get below 100 by the time I hit 90 minutes.
Okay.
And at that point, it's not really helping me as much
Yeah.
to sort of teach my muscles to get slower. So there's a little bit of like volume accumulation that needs to happen.
Got it.
So I would say minimum effective dose is that 45-minute working window, and then add the 5 minutes as you go. All right, so that's Hatchet. And that is going to be 9.7 out of 10 athletes that come to misfitathletics.com. We didn't read through all of these pieces. You've got the potential to back squat, heavy lunge in the lifting categories. We have the burpee box jump over row intervals. There are high intensity, running bitch work, 8 rounds of run for 90 seconds, walk for 4 minutes. Like that obviously in and of itself takes a ton of time to warm up, actually execute on, cool down from. There's MF2 work in there, which is the zone 2 stuff that we talked about. So when you log in for that first time, really lock in on the mandatory work and then think about adding from there. It can be overwhelming that first time to log in and see all of this stuff. But we've been sending people to the CrossFit Games for 12 years, and our variable programming system, we like to refer to it as the no one size fits all, is such a huge part of the success of athletes, because they can get what we think is appropriate for everybody and then personalize their program from there. But again, if you're an open athlete and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces, you're like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
The instructions are there for you. If you can put the blinders on, we have a really well thought out program for you each day that is just like a 60 to 90 minute session. And it then, extrapolates out there all the way up to the teens and masters that are going to the semifinals and CrossFit Games. We won't spend too much time on the MFT side, but I thought it would be cool to just let people know the wild nature of what it takes to perform training on these semifinals and CrossFit Games level.
Fuck. It's so much.
So basically, you're looking at the mandatory work for a semifinals CrossFit Games athlete is squat cleans, interval, skill work, zone 2 work, all of the accessories, and then 0 to 2 additional pieces, which could be lunging, a Metcon, or those nasty run intervals that we talked about. The accessory semifinals athletes, the ideal range is 2 to 3 of those movements. And then if you're a CrossFit Games athlete, I don't want to skip too far ahead in the conversation, but we're probably looking at what is kind of 3 sessions at that point. Like I know the highest level CrossFit Games athletes typically have 3 windows. And, so many of them have their situation worked out where they can go from session 1 right to like eating and doing what they need to do,
Yeah.
whether they've got like a lounge at their gym or they train at home and then they go right back out. So like it blurs the lines a little.
Yeah.
But semifinals athletes, we're definitely looking for all of that stuff that we mentioned, and the volume are non-negotiable, which just makes for a very interesting way for you to figure out how to like make things work within your day.
Yeah, I think this is where being, especially with if you are a semifinals or games level athlete without a remote coach, there's a lot of, let's just putting aside that we would say you should maybe get a remote coach, but let's say that you are doing this on your own. This is where you do have to really kind of do your due diligence about looking at the entirety of the week and saying like, this day's fucked. Like I'm going to get my pieces in, but I need to move things around a little bit because I know we've also got to assume that if you are at that level, you have enough awareness of what certain things are going to do to your body. Like that'll suck, but it's not going to fuck me up for the week. So like not a problem here. Or goddamn, I know lunges are going to make me sore for a week, so I need to potentially move this around or place this strategically in my day to make sure that it doesn't debilitate me for other training. So being a little bit more flexible. And again, like as a remote coach, I've never told an athlete that like you can't move something around. Like, hey, I flip-flop these days. Like, thumbs up, got it. Hey,
Right.
I couldn't do this piece, so I flip-flopped it. Or on the rare occasion, they actually now they don't ask anymore because they know I'm just going to say like, yep,
It's an
that's
insinuation
fine.
that they're being thoughtful about their training.
Exactly. Yeah, we want that, especially if you don't have somebody sanity checking you. You do want you to feel free to move things around in an intelligent way that works for you. But
We did already spend like 10,000 hours moving them for you.
yeah.
I just need to put that out there for my own sanity. Keep
Fair
going.
enough. Yeah. And you will still scroll through a day and be like, you guys fucking out of your minds? We'll be like, maybe, but you are too. So
yeah. That's what's maybe where we cross over into the idea of like training for performance versus training for like health span, lifespan, that sort of thing.
Sure.
There's no way to train you to have the strength, skill, capacity across so many different domains without what the fuck are you doing to my legs, my arms, whatever we joked about, I don't know. I thought about this a little bit more, like, is upper body pulling more functional than upper body pushing? Like, is that like
such a random thought?
Well, it's just like, why do they do so much of it at the CrossFit Games versus the other? They do so much upper body pulling every single year.
Yeah.
And like at some point, did someone say like, you're going to pull yourself up a lot more than you have to push something? Anyways,
Yeah.
side tangent there. But basically,
Probably because there are more pulling movements that feel like pullers are like closer to lower body as far as like slow twitch ability versus the pushers.
Yeah.
Like they just die a lot faster. You're a little bit more limited by the movements and the
and there's a lot of nuance.
capacity. And there's
Like,
a lot of nuance.
There are athletes who are, of course, the best of the best, are good at muscle ups, chest to bar pull-ups, and toes to bar.
Right.
There are athletes with wildly different capacities at a high level in all three of those movements.
Yeah.
It's like this one's, more about grip. This one's more about, the skill level.
Yeah.
This one's about general fitness capacity. Like those things can be all over the place. If you're not good at pressing, you suck at pressing.
It's like you can't handstand push up. You can't handstand push up.
True. So yeah, the semifinals athlete, again, to look back at it, the morning routine, the diet, the warm-ups and cooldowns, the mobility, the accessory, and the 5 to 6 pieces a day, which again include things like skill and accessory. It's not that many conditioning pieces. It becomes mandatory, and it's like this full-time job to figure out how to still do things in a way where you get intensity of body and mind and focus and all of that.
Yeah.
There are still there are still high level games athletes that have full-time jobs.
Yep.
Maybe outliers, exceptions to the rule. There are quite a few more semifinals athletes, but I
Sure.
know a lot of them
I mean, how many
want to go to the games.
how many NFL superstars do you know who can not touch a football in the off season, come into training camp, barely participate, and they're still best player in the league, Antonio Brown or something like that.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. But that I think that's the exception, not the rule. Right. There's also a huge element of in CrossFit specifically, I would say that doesn't quite as much apply to other sports, is that like having an established baseline of 1, fitness, 2, training age, 3, like general athletic experience are all massive factors, where I think the sport of CrossFit is, due to its accessibility to the masses, creates a larger distinction between athletes who have that, like a competitive history, an athletic background with and combine that with like the work ethic to do it, not necessarily like the 1 in a million superstar capability set. So I think just like keeping that in mind, it's not and to go back to like the performance versus health thing, it's like, again, you compare it to a professional sport, like NFL players a lot of them are phenomenally fit. Probably none of them are actually healthy, in the broadest sense of the term, of like bodies are broken, like talking like neurological stuff. Yeah. There aren't too many competitive sports.
Quarterbacks and kickers sometimes can be healthy.
Yeah. Like any sport at the highest level, like while we consider them to be like physically fit and therefore assume that they're healthy, like those guys are fucking beat to shit.
Yeah, there's a reason there's a lot of canes at the Hall of Fame inductions.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to go over it one more time. Just looking at this, I'm seeing 4 pieces would be kind of the minimum, and then a CrossFit Games athlete's probably going to end up with 5 or 6, depending on whether the skill is mandatory or not. Choosing the order is about you. Personally, there is no way I would get in so much trouble with the people that have to actually post this stuff to misfitathletics.com and Fitter for me to write the nuance every single day into how you would choose the order of your pieces. Yeah. Make those broad general goals for a phase, highlight those things, and then ask yourself, if I put these 2 conditioning pieces or these 2 lifts close together within a session, is that going to help them or hurt them?
Yeah.
And once you answer that question, you split them apart, and it's kind of just process of elimination, to be honest. You're going to end up with a couple of really thoughtful decisions, and then the other stuff's going to fill itself in based on time.
Yeah. I mean, again, like when you're thinking about this, it's like, why are the instructions different for the semifinals and games athletes? It's, well, if you are at that level, like you have the tools are already there, right?
Yeah.
And we're choosing things that are based on much more nuanced kind of decisions, like, what is the most optimal order for me to give the most effort to each training piece? And like, even if I have to get a little bit stronger, like maybe squat clean isn't the first thing that I do in the day, because that will deteriorate like the rest of my training day. So just, I think for that level of athlete, like you said, it is much more like, what order makes the most sense for me to get the most out of this training day. And a lot of it does kind of self-select for you. And maybe you have to make a couple decisions about like, I'll do this at the end of the day, because like ultimately I'm pretty good at that. And it's not a throwaway, but it's like the least important of the important things I have to do.
The 2 final topics will be the spectrum of stimulus versus strategy, and then what happens at basically the end of these days. So at this point in the season, when we look at that spectrum and we say, I am chasing the stimulus of the intended piece that I'm going to personalize for myself, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is strategy to get the absolute best score on this workout. We are very far to the left, to that first side at this point in the season. And that means a lot for volume and intensity and what happens to your body. Muscle endurance workouts are mandatory every single day during phase 1 for all programs. How you look at that from your personal stimulus standpoint is, what is the thing in this workout that is going to slow me down the most, just in terms of I can't do another rep because my muscles aren't agreeing to do so. We do that through running interference. So it's like, Jesus, all these basically the three same movement patterns going through. We do that with large sets of movements, and you have to decide what makes the most sense for you within the workout to improve. The easiest one for me is looking at it and identifying, like, if it's a triplet, I see that movement in there. That's my movement that I'm not good at, that I don't like, that I need to work on. Especially this time of the year, I will tell an athlete, like, I want that either unbroken, or I want it, if it's always 4 sets, it's now 2. And you need to learn what it takes to continue to do that in the other 2 movements every time you come back around to it, whether it's rounds for time, an AMRAP, whatever. But at this point in the season, you have to be okay with your training partner being more like a training buddy and not someone you're competing against.
Yeah.
And you should hold each other to, I'm working on chest to bar today and you're working on rowing. And it's the same workout. And after, we're going to compare notes. But still, like, you need to attack the stimulus based on what we ask you to do and what works for you.
You should think about training to the stimulus as improving your capacity in a specific stimulus.
Yeah.
If you were to do kind of the opposite, if you were going to say, I'm going to work on my strategy for the first half of the season, and then I'm going to improve my capacity in the second half of the season, by the time you get to competing, you're like, I no longer have an up-to-date understanding of what my capacity is. So we want to, that's kind of why we prioritize the stimulus, more of the stimulus stuff on the front end, because we want to increase your capacity to set you up for a point in the season later on when we say, like, hey, we want these we want to know how fast you can go in this workout based on the capacity that you spent time building in the first half of the season. So your strategy is implemented with the most up-to-date information about your muscular capacity, about your lung capacity, about your, ability to move from movement to movement, transitions wise, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's one of the ways that you can think about it is it's sort of, I was going to use the analogy of the Metcon reset, but I don't then want to go explain what that is to everybody. When you look at the workout again and you see that thing that you want to improve on, ask yourself, what is a realistic execution of this movement in the near term, and literally do that in this workout, knowing that the other movements will suffer. We move on in phase 2 to biasing the gas stimulus. Same concept. You're looking at the burpee box jump overs, the rowing, any of these things that put our hearts in our throat. And it's like, okay, I cannot keep like my best score by going at 1,200 calories per hour on the, on the ski erg. But that's what I think I'm going to be capable of, or I want to be capable of come the spring. And I'm going to do that and then back off a little bit on those other 2 movements.
Yep.
So really try to think about that, because then you're not also burying yourself every single day for 27 weeks. That's a long time.
Yeah. A lot of times you can, the intensity, it's hard sometimes, especially if you're a little bit newer, understanding like where the line is between intensity as it relates to like objective power output, like how much work did I do, how fast did I do it, therefore this is my power output and I beat my friend so I'm fitter, or is it, am I willing to sacrifice a little bit of power output for the purpose of, overreaching within the workout in a specific movement, or, trying to hold a specific pace that I know isn't actually smart and tenable if this were, an open workout where I was going for the best time. But you have to be willing to overreach to build that capacity. And then when it comes time to strategize in such a way that's like, oh, you hate that movement? Great. We're going to break it up and make sure that like it doesn't destroy you in this test, because the goal isn't like, I did everything unbroken in the open. It was like, no, I want the best score that you can possibly get. And if that means doing singles instead of an unbroken set of 10, like that's going to be what we do. But at this time of the year, we want to make it possible. We want to say, hey, I want you to do that set of 10 unbroken so that when the open comes around, you can do 3 sets instead of 10 sets.
Last but not least, and another way to hopefully get you to think about more is not better, is we haven't talked a ton about recovery protocols, sleep, non-exercise movement, diet, and what I call creating space. So when we start to think about those things again, we've now, you either have the full-time job of training, which takes up basically the amount of time as it does to work and train.
Sure.
Or you're on the other side and you work a full-time job and you're doing, sort of the open athlete volume. At the end of the day, the amount of free time available to those people is actually kind of similar. And you have to think about the best ways to, be recovered to be able to do it again. And I think the unrealistic, it's almost like our CrossFit New Year's right now at misfitathletics.com. You can get pretty fired up for phase 1 to get started. And if we create these unrealistic routines for ourselves, how resilient you are, great. I'm glad that you are either more or less resilient than somebody else, but like you will run into that wall eventually.
Yeah.
So what is realistic for you to, again, think about these things, to make sure that you're prioritizing sleep, to understand that if you do sit at a desk all day and you go really hard in the gym, that you are actually at higher risk for certain health concerns than someone who gets 12,000 steps a day and doesn't really do any high intensity exercise.
Yeah.
So we got to work that in. We got to track how much we're moving. As the volume goes up, the calories have to go up, and you have to play with, do I burn fat well? Do I need to be super high carb? Like, oh no, I have 100 grams of protein left in my day and I'm not hungry at all. How the hell am I going to do this? So being able to figure those things out, again, creates a whole nother level of like, I'm putting brain space towards these things. I'm allotting time for these things, and the windows are starting to shrink.
Yeah, those things have to be part of the iterative process, to go back to kind of what we started with as far as like linear progression, going from the point of I'm an open athlete doing just the 5x5 back squat and row burpee box jump intervals. Like, what's the fuel requirement for that? Okay, what is now, if I add one thing, what is the additional fuel and recovery requirement for that? And every time you go back and forth, you say like, okay, now I'm going to take something out of the sheet and put it into the gym in real life. Well, now you also need to take some more meat out of the freezer to eat later on in the night, to make sure that you are okay. Am I now going to bed at 8:30 instead of 9 because I did the MF2 session today? And all of those things have to be part of the iterative process. And it kind of sucks that it falls by the wayside in a sense, because we spend so much time talking about the programming and whatnot. But like at the end of the day, the program is only as sustainable as you enable your body and mind to sustain it.
I personally have to do what I consider a ridiculous amount of mobility and accessory work for my body to agree to have intensity.
Yeah.
And those are just things that you figure out and that change as you get a little bit older. And I'm doing it so that I can have intensity. If you are doing it so that you can have intensity and then a good performance, you have to take those kinds of things seriously. Yeah. I was going to spend some time on, I think it's probably time for final thoughts, but a topic for another episode, and potentially we can answer some Q&A questions coming up, is just scheduling in like absolute dead time for yourself as a human being. I think is so important. I think we can get, with all that we're talking about here, that can be a fucking hamster wheel.
Yeah,
we can get that. And some of you, I'm a parent as of recently, and you can kind of laugh at these things, that they're even possible, but like, we got to get our steps in. So maybe you're going for walks and that's how you do it. Or maybe you've got 2 rest days a week and that you can, log an hour of you time, that sort of thing. But creating that space for yourself to think through things and reorganize your week and all that, I think is super important. Final thoughts.
I think just the final thoughts, especially if you're someone who's new and listening, and maybe you log on and see Fitter and you see this fucking Cheesecake Factory menu of items, like 600 items. Gordon Ramsay is fucking irate when he logs on to misfitathletics.com. Please don't get overwhelmed. Read the instructions. Like, if I would say listen to the podcast, but if you're listening to the podcast, you're listening to the podcast. But get into Discord, ask us questions, that sort of thing. Pay attention to the instructions, and probably more importantly, like at the end of the day, as much as we try to provide a variable training system for you to personalize this, there is no better person to personalize it than you. Like there's no number of instructions or nuances that we can type and explain, even if people were going to read it, which they wouldn't. There's nothing that we can do to answer extremely personal questions for you. So just be flexible and be willing to kind of experiment, fail a little bit. This is the time of year to do that, to get a feel for, what you want your training season to ultimately kind of like turn into over the course of the next 6 months.
Our ecosystem started with the idea of one size fits all can't work in this thing, that it's just so many different things to be better at. Maybe there's a one size fits all program for, like a narrow lane sport.
Yeah.
Even then, probably not. Right.
Yeah.
So that is what our blog is based on. And that is what our content is based on. And that is what the power of the Discord community is based on. So, we've, I think, all reached a point in our careers that this idea of an athlete coming to us on any level, that, their effort and attitude is in the place that is helpful to them and to the community. Like, I'm all in on helping. I would be just as excited as someone coming to us and saying, like, I jumped 1,000 spots in the open after being, communicating in the Discord channel and, participating in a Q&A on the podcast, and us just knowing that they're really buying into the whole thing, as I would someone, jumping a handful of spots at the CrossFit Games. Like, the idea here is that if you, again, enter the ecosystem with an open mind and a good attitude and use the tools that we've put out there, YouTube channel, again, Discord, podcast, program, you are getting closer and closer to essentially having a remote coach. So I would just, anybody that's joining us for phase 1 or reevaluating the way that they're thinking about things for phase 1 and for a new training season, please use all of the tools at your disposal. It can make a massive difference. We've talked about athletes before in the past who are like have a PhD in like Misfit athletics. Those are the athletes where you're like, that first time they showed up at camp or whatever, if you would have told me that they were going to the CrossFit Games, it would have been like, okay, yeah, sure. But there's something to that buy-in. There's something to trying really hard, having a good attitude, being a good member of the Misfit community. So, there is no one size fits all, but really buying into all of this stuff can help create a program that is personalized for you, but you also feel like you're part of a greater community, which I think is something that's super important to sort of hold on to the CrossFit methodology. Did we do it?
We did it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Sherb. Thanks, Zion, for taking Sherb for a week. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Misfit podcast. And thank you to our show sponsors, sharpentheaxeco.com. Use your favorite athlete code, misfitathletics.com for your individual programming needs, teammisfit.com for your affiliate programming needs, and properfuel.co. Use the code word misfit for the best supplements in the game. Good luck this week. We'll see you next week time. Bye.